Welcome, dear listener, to another journey through the quieter corridors of history. Tonight, we travel to ancient China, to a time when stone and earth stretched across mountains and valleys in an endless serpentine line. The Great Wall of China, that monument you've seen in countless photographs. That wonder of the world that draws millions of visitors each year, was not built as a tourist destination. It was not constructed as a symbol of architectural achievement, though it certainly became one. No, the Great Wall was built as a barrier, a defense, a prison of sorts. And tonight, as you settle into the comfort of your bed, surrounded by warmth and safety, we'll explore what life was truly like for those who lived, worked, and died along its endless expanse. Imagine yourself transported back over 2,000 years, when the wall was not yet weathered by time, when its watchtowers stood newly built against the harsh northern winds. Picture the lives of ordinary people, soldiers, workers, farmers whose daily existence was shaped by this massive undertaking. Their world was one of constant vigilance, brutal weather, and backbreaking labor. A world where survival itself was an achievement. Tonight's journey will take us through 4 distinct realms of this ancient Chinese world. We'll begin by walking in the footsteps of the guards who manned the wall's watchtowers, experiencing the grinding reality of their daily existence. Then we'll turn our attention to the man whose vision created this marvel, Emperor Qin Shi Huang, the first to unite China under one rule, yet whose quest for immortality held the profound loneliness of absolute power. Our third stop will be the mysterious realm of the Terracotta Army, where thousands of clay warriors stand eternal guard over their emperor's tomb. Finally, we'll step inside the imperial palace itself, where elaborate ceremony mask lives of golden confinement. So breathe deeply, let your muscles relax, and prepare to drift back through the centuries to a time when the rhythm of life was measured not in hours, but in seasons, not in comfort, but in survival. The morning mist clings to the mountainside as you wake before dawn in your small, stone watchtower. The air is thin here, high in the mountains that form China's northern frontier, and each breath comes with effort. Your sleeping mat, woven from coarse hemp, provides little cushioning against the cold stone floor. The narrow window openings designed for defense, not comfort, allow the bitter wind to whistle through your quarters with relentless persistence. You are a soldier of the Han Dynasty. Though the wall you guard was begun centuries earlier under the Qin, your life, like that of thousands of other guards stretched along this impossibly long fortification, follows the same unchanging pattern day after day, season after season, year after year. The first task of each morning is to survey your section of the wall. You climb the narrow stone steps to the watchtower's highest point, your breath forming small clouds in the frigid air. From here, you can see perhaps 10 li in each direction, about 3 miles of wall snaking across the mountainous terrain, like the spine of some sleeping dragon. To your left and right, other watchtowers dot the landscape, each one home to another small garrison of soldiers living lives much like your own. The wall itself is not the neat, uniform structure that modern visitors see in photographs. Here, in this earlier period, much of it is built from rammed earth layer upon layer of soil, clay, and stone pounded down by countless workers using wooden tools. Some sections incorporate local materials, stone where it's plentiful, brick where clay is abundant, even bundled reeds in the desert regions. The wall varies in height from 15 to 30 feet, topped with crenellated battlements that provide minimal shelter from the elements. Your daily rations arrive weekly, if weather permits, carried by supply trains that follow treacherous mountain paths. The food is basic and often inadequate: millet, dried beans, occasional preserved meat, and weak tea. In winter, when mountain passes become impassable, you might go weeks surviving on stored grain and melted snow. The supply trains also bring news from the outside world, letters from families you may not see for years, and replacement soldiers for those who have died or become too ill to continue their service. Fresh water comes from mountain streams when available, or from carefully maintained cisterns that collect rainwater. In the dry seasons, water becomes so precious that every drop must be accounted for. You learn to live with a constant, nagging thirst, to ration not just food, but every sip of liquid that passes your lips. The luxury of washing becomes a memory. Most soldiers along the wall go months between proper baths, their skin weathered and cracked from wind and sun. The isolation weighs on you heavily as the mountain air presses thin in your lungs. Your garrison consists of perhaps 8 to 12 men, depending on the strategic importance of your section. These become your entire world, your brothers, your rivals, your only human contact for months at a time. Personality conflicts that might be minor irritations in civilian life become sources of bitter feuds when you're trapped together in a space no larger than a modern apartment. Communication with other sections of the wall happens through an ancient but effective system: smoke signals by day, fire beacons by night. Each watchtower maintains supplies of dried wolf dung, which burns with a distinctive smoke, and bundles of wood for nighttime fires. The signals have specific meanings: 1 fire for a small raiding party, to for a larger force, 3 for an invasion. During your watch, you must constantly scan both the northern horizon for threats and the neighboring towers for signals that you'll need to relay down the line. The northern frontier is home to various nomadic tribespeople who've been taught to think of as barbarians, though you've learned that they're skilled warriors and horsemen who know this landscape far better than you do. They appear suddenly, like ghosts emerging from the morning mist, their horses small but hardy, adapted to the harsh climate that slowly kills Chinese soldiers. When they come, it's usually not for large-scale invasion, but for raids, swift attacks designed to capture supplies, livestock, or prisoners for ransom. During an attack, your watchtower becomes both fortress and trap. The thick walls protect you from arrows, but they also limit your options for escape. If raiders scale the wall and take your tower, you and your fellow soldiers face capture, death, or worse. The psychological strain of constant vigilance, of knowing that any moment might bring violence, gradually wears away at your mental resilience like water wearing away stone. The weather along the wall varies dramatically depending on the season and location, but it's uniformly harsh. Summer brings scorching heat that makes metal too hot to touch, while winter temperatures plummet far below freezing. Spring and autumn offer brief respites, but even these seasons come with challenges: spring floods that can wash away sections of wall, autumn storms that tear at the wooden structures of watchtowers and leave you exposed to the elements. Your clothing is standardized military issue: hemp or wool tunics, leather boots that never quite keep your feet dry, and a heavy felt coat for winter that smells perpetually of smoke and unwashed bodies. In extreme cold, you and your fellow guards huddle together for warmth, sharing body heat as the only way to survive nights when the temperature drops low enough to freeze your breath before it leaves your mouth. Disease is a constant threat in these conditions. Minor cuts become infected easily, and without proper medical care, infections can prove fatal. Stomach ailments from contaminated water or spoiled food are common, leaving soldiers weakened at times when they need to be most alert. Respiratory problems develop from breathing thin mountain air, mixed with smoke from signal fires and cooking braziers. Many guards develop a persistent cough that never quite goes away, their lungs slowly filling with fluid as their bodies struggle to adapt to the harsh environment. The boredom is almost as difficult to endure as the physical hardships. Day after day, you scan empty horizons, perform the same maintenance tasks, eat the same meager meals, and engage in the same conversations with the same small group of men. Some soldiers carve simple games into stone surfaces, others practice calligraphy when they can obtain writing materials. A few become skilled at craft whittling, simple metalwork, or weaving using whatever materials they can scrounge. Letters from home become precious beyond measure. Read and reread until the paper falls apart. They bring news of births, deaths, marriages, and harvests from a world that seems increasingly distant and unreal. Many soldiers carry small personal items: a piece of jade, a lock of hair from a wife or child, a carved wooden figure, talismans that connect them to lives they may never return to. The psychological toll of wall duty reflected in the high rates of desertion, despite severe penalties for abandoning one's post. Some soldiers simply walk away into the wilderness, preferring the uncertainty of life as a fugitive to the grinding certainty of wall service. Others turn to drink when it's available, or develop mental conditions that modern medicine would recognize as severe depression or anxiety disorders. Your term of service is theoretically fixed, perhaps 3 to 5 years, but the reality is often different. Transportation back to civilian life is irregular and expensive for the government to provide. Many soldiers find their service extended indefinitely, becoming permanent residents of the wall, whether they wish to be or not. Some eventually retire to small farming communities that spring up near major wall installations, their knowledge of frontier life making them valuable to these settlements, even as their health remains permanently damaged by years of harsh service. As night falls and you prepare for sleep on your thin mat, listening to the wind howl through the stone corridors of your watchtower, you might reflect on the irony of your situation. You are helping to build and maintain one of humanity's greatest architectural achievements, a structure that will be remembered for thousands of years. Yet your individual life, your personal suffering and sacrifice, will be forgotten completely. You are both part of something magnificent and utterly expendable, a contradiction that captures the essence of what it meant to be an ordinary person in an extraordinary historical moment. The wall stretches endlessly in both directions from your tower, disappearing into mountain mists and desert horizons. Somewhere along its length, thousands of other soldiers are living lives much like yours, cold, hungry, isolated, and afraid, yet stubbornly persistent in their duty. Together, you form a human chain as continuous as the stone and earth barrier you defend, each link essential to the whole, each link fragile and easily broken. Tomorrow will bring another day identical to today, and the day after that another, in an endless succession of small hardships and minor victories that make up the reality of life on the Great Wall of China. It is a reality far removed from the romantic images of later centuries. Yet it is the reality upon which one of history's greatest monuments was built, not with stone and mortar alone, but with human endurance, sacrifice, and an almost incomprehensible capacity to persist in the face of seemingly impossible conditions. As the wind settles around the watchtowers and the guards settle into their evening routines, let us step back in time to understand the man whose vision created this endless barrier. His name was Ying Zhong, though history knows him as Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China. To comprehend the magnitude of the Great Wall, you must first understand the extraordinary and troubled mind that conceived it. Picture yourself in the year 259 BCE, in the small kingdom of Qin, nestled in what is now northwestern China. The land is divided into 7 major kingdoms, each constantly warring with the others, in what scholars call the Warring States period. Into this world of perpetual conflict is born a prince whose childhood will be marked by political intrigue, exile, and the kind of uncertainty that shapes either great leaders or great tyrants, sometimes both. Ying Zheng's early years unfold like scenes from a drama, too strange for fiction. His father, Prince Yiren, is a hostage in the rival state of Zhao, part of the complex diplomatic arrangements that characterize this era of fragmented power. There, Prince Yiren meets a dancing girl of exceptional beauty, and from this union comes the future emperor. But the child's legitimacy is questioned from birth. Whispers suggest his real father might be Lu Bu Wei, the wealthy merchant who orchestrated his parents' meeting. Imagine the young prince growing up in this atmosphere of doubt and danger. His early years are spent not in the comfort of the Qin palace, but in exile in Zhao, where anti-Qin sentiment runs high. The boy learns early that his very existence is a political liability, that safety lies only in strength and cunning. When local unrest threatens his family, they must flee in the night, making a treacherous journey back to Qin territory, while pursuers hunt them like common criminals. These formative experiences plant seeds that will grow into the emperor's later obsessions with control, security, and the elimination of all potential threats. The child who once ran from enemies in the darkness will become the man who builds walls to keep enemies at bay, who standardizes everything within his realm to prevent the kind of chaos that marked his youth. At age 13, Yingzheng ascends to the throne of Qin, though real power remains in the hands of regents and advisors. The young king spends his adolescence learning the arts of war and statecraft from men who understand that Qin's survival depends on its ability to outlast and outfight its neighbors. He studies the writings of military strategists, practices calligraphy 4 hours each day, believing that disciplined writing reflects a disciplined mind, and observes the brutal realities of court politics. By his early 20s, he has consolidated power within Qin and begun the systematic conquest of the other 6 kingdoms. But this is not merely military expansion, it is the methodical implementation of a philosophy that will reshape Chinese civilization. The young king embraces legalism, a school of thought that views human nature as fundamentally selfish and chaotic, requiring strict laws and harsh punishments to maintain order. Under this philosophy, the king begins transforming not just territory, but the very concept of governance. Traditional feudal relationships, where local lords owe personal loyalty to the king, are swept away. Instead, he creates a centralized bureaucracy where officials are appointed based on merit and serve at the emperor's pleasure. The kingdom is divided into administrative units overseen by governors who can be transferred or removed at will, preventing the development of local power bases that might challenge central authority. As his armies advance across the Chinese landscape, conquering one kingdom after another, a pattern emerges in how the future emperor handles victory. Entire populations are relocated to prevent regional identity from threatening national unity. Local customs and dialects are gradually suppressed in favor of standardized practices. The weights and measures used in daily commerce, the width of cart axles, even the style of writing characters, all are unified according to Qin standards. Into 21 BCE, at age 38, Yingzheng achieves what no ruler before him had managed: the complete unification of China under a single government. To mark this unprecedented achievement, he takes a new title, Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of Qin, and declares that his dynasty will last for 10,000 generations. The irony that it will barely survive his own death is, of course, unknown to him at this moment of supreme triumph. But even as he savors victory, the emperor finds that success brings its own burdens. Ruling a unified China proves far more complex than conquering it. The empire stretches across vastly different climates and cultures, from the rice paddies of the south to the horse pastures of the north. Each region has its own traditions, its own way of life, its own potential for rebellion against central rule. It is during this period that the emperor conceives his greatest construction projects. The Great Wall represents more than defense against northern nomads. It embodies his philosophy of absolute control. By connecting and extending existing fortifications built by the conquered kingdoms, he creates a barrier that defines the very boundaries of civilization as he understands it. Everything south of the wall is China, ordered and controlled. Everything north remains the chaos of barbarian lands. The construction of the wall requires a degree of organization and resource allocation that staggers the imagination. Historians estimate that over 1 million workers participate in the project: soldiers, peasants, and prisoners laboring under conditions that claim hundreds of thousands of lives. The emperor views these casualties with the cold calculation of a man who measures success in dynasties, not individual lifespans. Simultaneously, he undertakes other projects that reflect his vision of imperial grandeur. A network of roads and canals links distant provinces, facilitating both commerce and military movement. A massive palace complex rises in the capital, its halls designed to accommodate the elaborate ceremonies that reinforce imperial authority. Most ambitious of all, work begins on his tomb, a underground city guarded by thousands of life-size terracotta warriors, each crafted with individual features and equipment. Yet, as the emperor's power grows, so does his isolation. The very efficiency of his governmental system distances him from ordinary human contact. Elaborate protocols govern every aspect of court life, turning simple interactions into ritualized performances. The emperor sleeps in a different palace each night, following routes known only to a few trusted guards, because informants have warned of numerous assassination plots. This isolation feeds into what becomes the emperor's defining obsession, the quest for immortality. Having unified the world as he knows it, having built monuments that will endure for millennia, he turns his attention to the one victory that remains beyond his reach: victory over death itself. The man who has conquered kingdoms now seeks to conquer time. He summons alchemists and scholars, promising vast rewards for anyone who can produce the elixir of life. Expeditions are funded to sail to mythical islands where immortal beings supposedly dwell. The emperor consumes various potions and powders, many containing mercury and other toxic substances that likely hasten rather than prevent his eventual demise. His court fills with charlatans and genuine seekers alike, all claiming knowledge of secrets that will grant eternal life. The irony deepens as the emperor's fear of death leads him to suppress any mention of it. Books containing references to mortality are burned. Scholars who dare suggest that death is natural face execution. The very word death becomes forbidden in the imperial presence, as if language itself could be legislated to change reality. In his later years, the first emperor becomes increasingly paranoid and reclusive. He travels constantly, believing that movement makes him harder to assassinate, but also because he fears that staying too long in one place might allow death to find him. His entourage grows ever larger and more elaborate, yet he trusts fewer and fewer people within it. The man who sought to bring order to chaos finds his own life consumed by the disorder of fear and suspicion. The emperor's daily routine becomes a complex ritual designed to ward off mortality. He rises before dawn to practice breathing exercises taught by Taoist masters. His meals are prepared by trusted cooks and tested by food tasters, not just for poison, but for any ingredient that might hasten aging. He wears robes of specific colors corresponding to ancient theories about longevity, and his daily schedule is arranged according to astrological calculations meant to align his activities with cosmic forces that promote long life. Yet for all his power, for all his precautions, the emperor cannot escape the fundamental human condition. Into 10 BCE, during one of his endless journeys across his empire, Qin Shi Huang falls ill and dies, possibly from mercury poisoning caused by the very potions he consumed seeking immortality. His death is kept secret for months, while his advisors maneuver to control the succession. A final irony for a man who spent his life trying to ensure perfect order and continuity. The emperor's fear of mortality is to elaborate arrangements for his death that reflect his living obsessions with control and grandeur. His tomb, still being excavated today, contains not just the famous terracotta army, but an entire underground representation of his empire, complete with rivers of mercury and the ceiling studded with precious stones to represent the night sky. Even in death, he seeks to maintain the absolute dominion that defined his life. The dynasty, he believed, would last 10,000 generations collapses within 15 years of his death. Torn apart by the very forces he spent his life trying to suppress: regional rivalries, popular resentment of harsh rule, and the ambitions of those who would replace centralized tyranny with their own version of order. Yet his vision of unified China survives, becoming the template for imperial rule that will persist, in various forms, for over 2,000 years. As you imagine the first emperor in his final years, constantly moving from palace to palace, consuming potions that slowly poison him, surrounded by luxury and belated from genuine human connection, you glimpse the profound loneliness that can accompany absolute power. Here was a man who commanded millions, who shaped the destiny of the world's most popular civilization, yet who spent his final years afraid to sleep in the same bed twice, terrified that the debt he refused to acknowledge and find him is he remains still too long. The Great Wall stands today as his most visible legacy, but perhaps his truest monument is the tension between order and freedom, between security and vitality, that continues to define human societies. The emperor who sought to live forever created institutions and structures that have indeed achieved a kind of immortality, outlasting not only their creator, but dozens of subsequent dynasties. In the end, Qin Shi Huang achieved neither the 10,000 generation dynasty he proclaimed, nor the personal immortality he desperately sought. Instead, he gained something perhaps more significant. He became the first person to imagine China as a unified whole, and then make that imagination real. The wall that stretches across the landscape, the bureaucratic systems that govern vast populations, the very concept of a single Chinese identity all flow from the vision of a man who was simultaneously one of history's greatest builders and one of its most troubled souls. As the first emperor's life draws to its close, let us descend into the earth itself, into chambers that lay hidden beneath Chinese soil for over 2 millennia. Here, in the darkness that has preserved them, stands one of archaeology's most remarkable discoveries, an army of clay soldiers, each one unique, each one crafted with such care that they seem almost ready to draw breath and resume their eternal watch. Picture yourself on a spring day in 1974, walking through the drought-stricken farmland east of Xi'an. You are a local farmer named Yong Jifa, and you're digging a well, hoping to find water for your persimmon trees. The earth here is hard-packed and difficult to work, but your crops depend on finding a reliable water source. Your shovel strikes something hard, not rock, but something with a different feel, something that rings hollowly when struck. As you clear away more earth, an extraordinary shape emerges, a human head, life-sized, crafted from terracotta clay. The features are detailed and individual, not the generic face of a statue, but the portrait of a specific person, weathered by time but remarkably preserved. You have no way of knowing that you have just uncovered the edge of one of history's most spectacular archaeological sites, a discovery that will transform our understanding of ancient Chinese civilization. The figure you've found is a soldier, standing at attention in what will prove to be pit, one of the terracotta armia, vast underground chamber containing over 6,000 clay warriors arranged in precise military formation. As archaeologists carefully excavate the site over the following decades, they reveal not just individual statues, but an entire army frozen in time, each figure crafted with extraordinary attention to detail and positioned according to ancient military protocols that demonstrate the sophistication of Qin dynasty warfare. Imagine yourself now as one of the craftsmen who created these figures over 2,000 years ago. You work in a vast workshop complex near the emperor's tomb, part of a production system that employed an estimated 700,000 workers over nearly 4 decades. The scale of the operation staggers the imagination. Entire communities devoted to creating this underground garrison for their deceased emperor. Your specialty is faces. You are among the artists responsible for ensuring that each warrior bears individual features. Working from clay that has been carefully prepared and aged, you sculpt expressions that range from stern determination to quiet contemplation. Some faces are young, smooth-cheeked soldiers barely out of boyhood. Others are weathered veterans with lined faces that speak of years of military service. No two are identical, yet all share a certain gravity, a sense of purpose that reflects their eternal mission. The process begins with the creation of the torso, built hollow to prevent cracking during the firing process. Arms and heads are crafted separately, then attached with clay slipper mixture that acts as both glue and filler. The level of detail extends to elements that would never be visible once the figures were positioned. The soles of shoes bear tread patterns appropriate to their military function, while undergarments are carefully rendered beneath outer clothing. Each warrior's equipment reflects his role within the army's hierarchy. Officers wear more elaborate armor, their ranks indicated by details in metalwork and clothing that demonstrate the rigid military structure of the Qin forces. Archers wear lighter protection suitable for mobility, while heavily armored infantry bear the equipment of frontline fighters. The weapons they once carried, real bronze swords, spears, and crossbows, were looted by rebels shortly after the emperor's death, but the warriors' poses still suggest the weight and balance of their missing armaments. The firing process requires enormous kilns capable of reaching temperatures over 1000 degrees Celsius. Imagine yourself working beside these massive furnaces, feeding them with carefully selected wood that burns hot and clean. The clay figures must be heated gradually to prevent cracking, then cooled slowly over several days. Many figures don't survive this process. Imperfections in the clay or variations in temperature cause them to crack or explode, representing months of wasted labor. Once fired, the figures receive their most remarkable feature, individualized coloring. Each warrior is painted with mineral pigments mixed with lacquer, creating a surface that appears almost lifelike. Hair is painted black or brown, skin tones vary from pale to weathered tan, and clothing displays the colors appropriate to each soldier's unit and rank. Imagine rows upon rows of these painted figures, vibrant and lifelike, standing in formation in their underground chambers. The pigments themselves tell stories of trade and technology that span the ancient world. The purple used for some officers' robes comes from a synthetic barium copper silicate color known as Chinese purple that represents one of the earliest artificial pigments ever created. The red pigments derive from cinnabar, mined from deposits hundreds of miles away and transported to the workshop in an enormous expense. These colors fade rapidly when exposed to air, which explains why the figures discovered today appear as natural terracotta clay rather than the vivid, painted soldiers they once were. The underground chambers that house the army represent engineering achievements nearly as impressive as the figures themselves. Pit 1, the largest, stretches over 200 meters in length and contains the main infantry formation, row upon row of warriors arranged in precise columns, with armored officers positioned to command their units. The chamber's wooden roof, supported by massive timber beams, was designed to bear the weight of earth and time while protecting the army below. Pit 2 contains a more complex formation representing cavalry, archers, and mixed infantry units, a tactical arrangement that demonstrates sophisticated military thinking. Here you find kneeling archers positioned to provide covering fire, standing crossbowmen ready to reload and fire in sequence, and the remains of war chariots with their teams of clay horses, each animal crafted with the same attention to individual detail as the human figures. The horses themselves deserve special attention, for they represent some of the most beautiful sculptures in the entire complex. Each animal stands about 4.5 feet tall, modeled after the sturdy war horses that carried Qin forces to victory across China. Their expressions seem alert and intelligent, ears pricked forward as if listening for commands. The harness and tack details are so precise that modern craftsmen can understand exactly how these animals were equipped for battle. Pit 3, the smallest of the major chambers, appears to contain the army's command structure, higher-ranking officers positioned around what may represent a mobile command post. The figures here are more elaborately decorated and positioned in ways that suggest strategic planning rather than direct combat. This chamber offers insights into the sophisticated military hierarchy that enabled the Qin forces to coordinate operations across vast distances. As archaeologists continue their painstaking work, other discoveries emerge from the complex surrounding the emperor's tomb. Bronze chariots, scaled to half size, but containing over 3,000 individual components, demonstrate metalworking skills that rival anything produced in the ancient world. Acrobats, musicians, and civil officials suggest that the emperor's afterlife court was intended to function as completely as his earthly government. Perhaps most intriguing are the details that speak to the individual craftsmen who created these works. Many figures bear stamps or inscriptions indicating which workshop produced them, allowing archaeologists to trace the organization of this massive production effort. Some inscriptions include personal names, individual artists signing their work, despite the fact that it would be buried and never seen by human eyes again. The psychological weight of working on such a project must have been enormous. Imagine spending years of your life crafting figures destined for burial, knowing that your finest work would disappear into the earth upon completion. Yet the quality of the craftsmanship suggests that these artisans took pride in their work, perhaps understanding that they were creating something unprecedented in human history. Recent technological advances have revealed secrets that the original discoverers could never have imagined. Ground-penetrating radar and magnetic surveys suggest that many more chambers remain unexcavated, possibly containing thousands of additional figures. Chemical analysis of the pigments has revealed sophisticated understanding of material science, while studies of the clay composition help archaeologists understand the supply chains that supported this massive undertaking. The tomb of the emperor himself remains largely unexcavated, protected both by archaeological caution and by ancient accounts describing deadly traps and rivers of mercury designed to kill intruders. Modern tests have detected unusually high mercury levels in the soil above the tomb, suggesting that these ancient descriptions may be literally accurate, that the emperor's final resting place contains hazards that remain lethal after 2 millennia. As you walk among these silent warriors in your imagination, consider the paradox they represent. Created by a civilization that valued conformity and standardization, each figure is nonetheless individual and unique. Commissioned by an emperor who sought to control every aspect of his realm, they were buried in chambers designed to remain hidden forever. Crafted to serve in death as they had served in life, they have instead become ambassadors from the ancient world to modern times. The terracotta army embodies the tensions that define the Qin dynasty between individual expression and state control, between the desire for immortality and the acceptance of death, between the urge to create lasting monuments and the need to keep them secret. In their silent ranks, we see reflected not just the military might that unified China, but the artistic vision and technical skill that made such unification possible. The craftsman who created these figures worked in the shadow of history's first emperor, translating his vision of eternal rule into clay and fire. They could not have known that their work would outlast the dynasty it was meant to serve, that their careful attention to individual faces and personal details would speak across centuries to people they could never have imagined. In the end, the terracotta army stands as testament to human creativity channeled through imperial ambition, thousands of unique expressions of artistry unified in service to a single, overwhelming vision. As you imagine these warriors standing in their underground chambers, eternal and patient, you glimpse both the grandeur and the fundamental loneliness of absolute power, preserved forever in clay and silence, from the buried silence of the terracotta army. Let us now rise to the surface and step through the vermilion gates of the Forbidden City, into a world where every gesture carries meaning, where beauty and terror exist side by side, and where the most powerful people in the empire live lives of exquisite confinement. Here, behind walls that separate the divine emperor from his mortal subjects, unfolds a daily drama of ceremony, intrigue, and profound isolation that defines what it means to live at the very center of absolute power. Picture yourself crossing the threshold into this sacred space during the Ming Dynasty, centuries after the first emperor's death, but in a palace system that still reflects his vision of imperial grandeur. The scale overwhelms your senses immediately. Courtyards vast enough to hold thousands of people, buildings with roof lines that sweep skyward like frozen music, and everywhere the color red, the imperial color that symbolizes good fortune and divine authority. You are entering not just a residence, but a universe unto itself, home to perhaps 10,000 people whose entire lives revolve around serving the needs and whims of a single individual. The emperor at the center of this world is considered the son of heaven, the earthly representative of divine will, whose every action must be performed according to protocols developed over centuries to maintain the cosmic harmony upon which the empire's stability depends. Imagine yourself as a young concubine, recently selected from among thousands of candidates across the empire for your beauty, intelligence, and family background. Your journey to the palace began months ago in your home province, where imperial officials conducted examinations not just of your appearance, but of your education, your health, and your family's political reliability. Out of perhaps 50 girls initially considered, only you and 2 others were chosen to make the journey to the capital. Your life now unfolds within carefully prescribed boundaries that are simultaneously luxurious and restrictive. Your quarters in the Palace of Gathered Elegance are furnished with silk hangings, lacquered furniture, and porcelain so fine it seems to glow within a light. Servants attend to your every need, bringing meals prepared in kitchens that employ hundreds of cooks, dressing you in robes whose fabric and embroidery indicate your exact rank within the palace hierarchy. Yet for all this luxury, your daily routine is governed by rules as strict as those that govern the soldiers on the Great Wall. You rise before dawn to begin the complex process of preparing for the day, bathing with perfumed water heated to precise temperatures, arranging your hair in styles that require hours to complete, and selecting clothing appropriate to your scheduled activities and current favor with the emperor. The cosmetics alone represent a science of beauty that consumes significant portions of each day. Your eyebrows must be plucked and redrawn in the fashionable shape, your face powdered to the desired shade of pale perfection that indicates noble breeding and indoor living. Rouge made from safflower petals colors your lips and cheeks, while kohl darkens your eyes in patterns that vary according to seasonal customs and imperial preferences. Your education continues daily under the guidance of older concubines and palace tutors who teach you the arts considered essential for imperial favor: poetry composition, musical performance, calligraphy, and the complex etiquette that governs every interaction within the palace walls. You learn to move with the gliding step that makes silk robes flow like water, to modulate your voice to the soft tones considered appropriately feminine, and to express thoughts through subtle indirection rather than direct statement. The hierarchy among the emperor's women is as rigid and complex as the governmental bureaucracy that administers the empire. At the apex stands the empress, chosen for political alliance rather than personal preference, whose primary duty is producing a male heir while maintaining diplomatic relationships with her birth family. Below her rank various levels of consorts and concubines, each with specific titles, privileges, and responsibilities that reflect their relationship to imperial favor. Competition among these women is inevitable and often vicious, though conducted with the same ritual politeness that characterizes all palace interactions. A slight change in the embroidery pattern of your robes might signal imperial displeasure, while an invitation to accompany the emperor on a garden walk could elevate your status dramatically. The constant uncertainty creates an atmosphere of nervous energy, barely concealed beneath layers of ceremonial courtesy. Your contact with the emperor himself, when it comes, reveals the strange isolation that accompanies absolute power. He is a man in his 30s, well educated and intelligent, yet he has never in his life experienced normal human relationships. Every person he encounters wants something from him: political favor, financial reward, or simply survival in a system where imperial displeasure can mean exile or death. Even his most intimate moments are choreographed according to ancient protocols designed to maintain imperial dignity. When he chooses to spend an evening in your company, the encounter follows established patterns as ritualized as a religious ceremony. Servants prepare special chambers, burning incense chosen for its supposed effects on imperial virility and romantic inclination. Your clothing and behavior follow scripts developed over generations, designed to please while maintaining appropriate deference to imperial authority. Yet beneath this elaborate choreography, you occasionally glimpse the profound loneliness of a man who has never experienced spontaneous human affection. His conversations reveal an intelligent individual trapped within a role that permits no authentic relationships, no moments of vulnerability, no relief from the constant performance of imperial authority. In these quiet interludes, you understand that the golden cage that constrains your life is nothing compared to the invisible prison that surrounds the emperor himself. Daily life in the palace revolves around ceremonies that mark the passage of time and seasons. The emperor's morning audiences follow ancient patterns, with officials arranged according to strict hierarchies, each wearing robes that indicate their rank and function. These sessions can last 4 hours, as matters of state are presented according to elaborate protocols that transform governmental business into theatrical performance. The emperor sits upon a throne positioned to catch the first light of dawn, symbolizing his role as mediator between heaven and earth. His responses to official presentations must be carefully modulated. Too much enthusiasm might upset cosmic balance, while insufficient attention could signal divine displeasure with his subjects' performance. Every gesture, every tone of voice, carries meanings that ripple outward through the governmental hierarchy. Meals in the palace represent similar exercises in symbolic meaning disguised as daily necessity. The emperor's food is prepared by teams of cooks who have trained 4 years in imperial cuisine. Dishes that represent not just nutrition, but political geography, ingredients from every province, demonstrating the empire's unity under imperial rule. Each dish must be tasted by officials who risk their lives daily to ensure that no poison reaches the imperial table. The emperor typically eats alone, served by attendants who kneel while presenting each course, their eyes fixed on the ground to avoid the presumption of meeting the imperial gaze. The isolation of these meals reflects the broader loneliness of imperial life, surrounded by hundreds of people whose sole purpose is serving his needs, yet fundamentally alone in ways that ordinary people can barely imagine. Seasonal festivals bring temporary relief from daily routine, but also intensify the ceremonial demands of imperial life. During New Year celebrations, the emperor must perform rituals that ensure the empire's prosperity for the coming year. Elaborate ceremonies involving sacrifices, proclamations, and audiences with representatives from every corner of his realm. His performance during these events is believed to directly influence harvests, weather patterns, and the general well-being of his subjects. The emperor's recreational activities reflect the same mixture of luxury and constraint that characterizes every aspect of palace life. Imperial gardens provide spaces for relaxation, but even these are designed according to philosophical principles that transform natural beauty into symbolic representation of cosmic harmony. Artificial hills represent distant mountains, while carefully positioned rocks and plants create miniature landscapes that capture the essence of the empire's geographical diversity. Hunting expeditions offer rare opportunities to leave the palace, but even these outings require massive logistical efforts involving thousands of guards, servants, and officials. The emperor's safety demands advanced scouting of routes, preparation of temporary palaces at stopping points, and elaborate security measures that transform simple recreation into military operations. The spontaneity that makes hunting enjoyable for ordinary people disappears beneath layers of imperial protocol. The palace's architectural design itself reinforces the isolation of imperial life. Successive courtyards create barriers between the emperor and the outside world, each one requiring higher levels of authorization to enter. The innermost courts, where the emperor's private quarters are located, are accessible only to eunuchs and selected concubines, creating an environment where normal family relationships are impossible by design. The eunuchs, who serve as intermediaries between the emperor and the outside world, represent another tragic element of palace life. These men, castrated in childhood to ensure their loyalty and eliminate potential threats to imperial succession, develop their own hierarchies and power structures within the palace system. Some achieve enormous influence, effectively controlling access to the emperor and shaping policy through their ability to filter information and requests As night falls over the palace, the emperor's evening routine reflects the same careful orchestration that governs his days. His sleeping arrangements are matters of state. Security guards patrol corridors outside his chambers, while trusted eunuchs maintain watch from adjoining rooms. Even sleep offers no complete escape from the demands of imperial authority, as the emperor must be ready to respond to emergencies that might require immediate decisions affecting millions of lives. The concubines retreat to their own quarters as evening approaches, following routines as ritualized as the emperor's own. In shared chambers designed for both companionship and surveillance, they engage in the delicate social navigation that characterizes all palace relationships. Conversations must be carefully measured to avoid giving offense while maintaining the alliances necessary for survival in this closed world. The palace at night becomes a different place. Corridors that bustle with activity during daylight hours fall quiet except for the soft footsteps of guards making their rounds. In this silence, both emperor and concubines confront the fundamental isolation that accompanies life at the center of absolute power. Surrounded by luxury that most of their subjects can barely imagine, they experience forms of loneliness that ordinary people, for all their hardships, never know. The children born into this environment face their own unique challenges. Imperial princes grow up knowing that their birth order and maternal politics will largely determine their futures, some destined for high government positions, others for comfortable irrelevance, and a few for the throne itself with all its burdens. Imperial daughters face even more constrained futures, their marriages serving as diplomatic tools to cement political alliances. The education provided to these imperial children represents the finest available in the empire, yet it is education designed to perpetuate the system that constrains their lives. They learn classical literature, military strategy, and governmental administration, but they also internalize the protocols and assumptions that will prevent them from ever experiencing normal human relationships or personal freedom. As you imagine this world of golden cages and silk-lined prisons, consider the paradox of power that the imperial palace represents. Here lived individuals who could command armies, reshape landscapes, and determine the fates of millions, yet who were themselves prisoners of a system that elevated them beyond ordinary humanity while cutting them off from authentic human connection. The Great Wall that stretches across China's northern frontier finds its spiritual counterpart in the invisible walls that surrounded the forbidden city. Barriers designed not to keep enemies out, but to preserve the sacred isolation that imperial authority required. In both cases, the cost of security was measured in human lives constrained and shaped by forces beyond individual control. The palace that housed China's emperors for nearly 5 centuries stands today as monument to human ambition and human tragedy intertwined. Its beauty remains breathtaking, its architectural achievement undeniable, yet its true legacy may be the insight it provides into the ultimate loneliness of absolute power, the understanding that the highest positions in human society can also be the most profoundly isolating. As our journey through ancient China draws to its close, let us pause for a moment in the quiet darkness that surrounds you now, in the comfort of your modern bed, and reflect on the lives we have witnessed across these many centuries. From the windswept watchtowers of the Great Wall to the silk-lined chambers of the Forbidden City, we have walked alongside people whose daily existence was shaped by forces and circumstances almost unimaginable to us today. Think first of those anonymous guards on the wall, men whose names history has forgotten, but whose collective sacrifice built one of humanity's most enduring monuments. In their cold watchtowers, sharing thin soup and thinner blankets, they experienced hardships that would break most of us within days. Yet they persisted, season after season, year after year, their individual sufferings dissolving into the larger story of human endurance and determination. Their lives were measured not in comfort, but in duty, not in personal fulfillment, but in service to something greater than themselves. As you lie in your warm bed tonight, surrounded by safety they could never have imagined, You carry forward their legacy, the understanding that civilization itself is built upon countless small acts of persistence by ordinary people facing extraordinary challenges. We have also walked with the first emperor, that extraordinary, untroubled figure whose vision transformed a continent. In his restless journeys from palace to palace, in his desperate quest for immortality, we glimpse the profound loneliness that can accompany absolute power. His story reminds us that even those who command empires remain, in the end, mortal beings struggling with the same fundamental questions that face us all: questions of purpose, legacy, and the meaning of a single life against the vast backdrop of time. The emperor's walls, both the physical barrier that stretches across northern China and the invisible barriers that surrounded his daily life, speak to humanity's eternal tension between security and freedom, between the desire for control and the need for authentic connection. His monuments endure, but perhaps his truest legacy is the reminder that power without genuine human relationship becomes a kind of magnificent imprisonment. In the silent chambers where the terracotta army stands eternal guard, we discovered something remarkable about human creativity, lulled through imperial ambition. Those ancient craftsmen, working in vast workshops to create figures destined for burial, invested their individual artistry in service to a collective vision. Each warrior's unique face represents a moment when anonymous skill became enduring art, when temporary labor created permanent beauty. The army they created embodies a beautiful paradox: thousands of individual expressions, unified in common purpose, personal creativity flourishing even within rigid imperial demands. Their story suggests that human artistry finds ways to assert itself even in the most constraining circumstances, that the urge to create something meaningful transcends the conditions under which that creativity must operate. Finally, we entered the golden cage of the imperial palace, where the empire's most privileged inhabitants lived lives of exquisite constraint. In the daily routines of emperors and concubines, in the elaborate ceremonies that transformed simple human needs into ritualized performances, we saw how luxury and imprisonment can intertwine in ways that make both more complete. The palace dwellers remind us that comfort and freedom are not the same thing, that security and happiness can exist in tension rather than harmony. Their lives of silk-lined solitude offer a counterpoint to the harsh exposure of the wall guards' different forms of sacrifice in service to the same overwhelming system. What connects all these lives across centuries and social divisions is the fundamental human capacity to find meaning and dignity within circumstances not of their own choosing. The guard who maintains his watch despite hunger and cold, the emperor who performs his duties despite isolation and fear, the craftsman who perfects details no living person will ever see, the concubine who finds moments of genuine connection within elaborate artificial relationships, all demonstrate the resilience that allows human beings to create significance from whatever materials their circumstances provide. Their world was harsher than ours in almost every measurable way. Disease claimed lives that modern medicine saves routinely, whether killed people who lacked adequate shelter, and political systems offered little recourse for those born into disadvantageous positions. Yet within these constraints, they built families, created art, found love, experienced joy, and constructed meaning from the raw materials of daily existence. As you settle deeper into sleep tonight, surrounded by the comfort and security that represent humanity's greatest historical achievement, you carry forward their legacy. The warmth that surrounds you, the safety you take for granted, the freedom to choose your own path through life all represent the accumulated progress purchased by countless generations of people who lived more constrained lives in service of a future they would never see. The Great Wall itself stands as perhaps the perfect metaphor for this inheritance. Built by people who never experienced the security it was meant to provide, maintained by guards who died protecting a peace they never fully enjoyed. It embodies humanity's willingness to sacrifice immediate comfort for long-term safety and stability. The wall you might visit as a tourist exists because millions of people accepted temporary hardship in service of permanent achievement. But the wall also reminds us that all human barriers are ultimately temporary, that even the most imposing constructions eventually yield to time and change. The political systems that seemed eternal to their inhabitants have long since passed away, replaced by new arrangements that will themselves someday seem as remote as the Qin dynasty appears to us now. What endures is not the specific forms that human organization takes, but the underlying capacity for cooperation, creativity, and sacrifice that makes any form of civilization possible. The guards and emperors, craftsmen and concubines who populated our story tonight all contributed to a continuous human project that connects their ancient world to your modern one. Their daily struggles for warmth, safety, meaning, and connection mirror your own in ways that transcend the vast differences in circumstances. The questions they faced about how to live with dignity, how to find purpose in difficult conditions, how to maintain hope despite uncertainty, remain as relevant today as they were 2,000 years ago. The comfort that surrounds you as you drift towards sleep represents not just modern technology, but the accumulated wisdom of generations who learned, through trial and error, hardship and persistence, how to create better conditions for those who would come after them. Your warm bed, your secure home, your freedom to shape your own future all exist because countless people before you chose to build, rather than merely survive, to sacrifice for others, rather than preserve only themselves. In this sense, you were both heir to their achievements and custodian of their legacy. The civilization you inhabit carries forward their dreams and aspirations, their accumulated knowledge and hard-won wisdom. The peaceful sleep that awaits you tonight is possible because people like the wall guards accepted sleepless nights, because emperors bore the burdens of leadership, because craftsmen invested their skills in projects larger than themselves, because court dwellers maintained the ceremonies and traditions that preserved cultural continuity across centuries. As consciousness fades and sleep takes hold, let the rhythm of your breathing echo the eternal rhythm of human persistence, the steady, patient, enduring effort that has carried our species from the harsh watchtowers of ancient walls to the comfortable security of the modern world. In your dreams tonight, you join the great continuous story of human endeavor, adding your own chapter to a narrative that began long before your birth and will continue long after your life has passed into history. Rest well, knowing that your sleep is protected by the accumulated efforts of all those who came before, and that your own life's work will someday contribute to the comfort and security of others yet to be born. The Great Wall of China stretches not just across physical landscape, but across time itself, connecting past to present to future in an unbroken chain of human hope and determination. Sleep peacefully, and dream of the endless wall winding across misty mountains, of silent clay warriors standing eternal watch, of palace gardens where beauty transcends the constraints that created it, and of the quiet heroism of ordinary people whose small acts of courage and persistence built the foundation of the world you inhabit today.